in listen-only mode.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the webcast. My name is Christine Dursey-Davis. I'm the Executive Director of the Ohio chapter of APA and Chair-elect of the Neurourbanism Division, and I am your webcast moderator. Today, Friday, December 4th, we will hear the presentation, The Ethics of Private Practice Consulting. For technical help during today's webcast, type your questions in the chat box found in the webcast toolbar to the right of your screen, or call the 1-800 number shown in bold. For content questions related to the presentation, type those in the questions box, also located in the webinar toolbar to the right of your screen, and we will answer those at the end of the presentation during the Q&A. I'd also like to let you know we have several polls that we will be conducting today, so please be sure to keep your screen active so that you can participate. Also, in your GoToWebinar toolbar, you'll see that there is a handout available. It is just a copy of the AICP Code of Ethics, in case you are so inclined. Coming up on your screen is a list of the sponsoring chapters and divisions for 2015. Thank you to all the participating sponsors for making these webcasts possible and free to their members. Today's webcast is sponsored by the Private Practice Division. To learn more about the divisions, visit planning.org/divisions, and to learn about our chapters, planning.org/chapters. Coming up on your screen is our last webcast for 2015. To register for this webcast, please visit our webcast webpage at ohioplanning.org/planningwebcast. Our 2000 schedule is being built now, so please be sure to check back on our webpage for our upcoming sessions in 2016. To log your CM credits for attending today's webcast, just visit planning.org and log into your MyAPA account. Then navigate to your dashboard, and at the top, select Activities by Provider. That's the easiest way to do this. And then type in today's sponsor. Again, it's the Private Practice Division. And this webcast has been approved for 1.5 CM ethics credits for live viewing only. We do have some recorded webcasts which are available through December, the end of December, for distance education. And you can check on those at ohioplanning.org/planningwebcast. I know for sure we have one ethics available, we have one law available, and one regular one available for those who need to get some credits in by the end of the year. And like us on Facebook, Planning Webcast Series, to receive up-to-date information on our upcoming sessions. This will especially be helpful as we start to get all of our 2016 sessions lined up for January. And we are recording today's webcast. It will be available on our YouTube channel. Just search Planning Webcast on YouTube or youtube.com/planningwebcast. And a PDF of the PowerPoint will also be available after the presentation ends on our webpage, again, ohioplanning.org/planningwebcast. Okay, with that, I am going to turn it over to Dina Roadside. She's a director at Roadside in Harwell, and she's also the vice chair of the Private Practice Division, and she's going to kick us off this afternoon. Dina, it's all you.
Thanks, Christine. Can everybody see?
It looks great. You're in presentation mode.
Okay, good. But it says scenarios and situations on the screen.
You might want to just back up then to your first slide of your presentation.
Here it goes.
No one look.
Thank you. Okay. Here we go.
Great.
Once again, I am Dina Roadside, and I wanted to welcome you all to the Ethics of Private Practice Consulting, speaking about planning consultants and the AICP Code of Ethics. The presentation we're giving today was one that was presented at the APA conference this year with great success. We had wonderful attendance and good feedback, and so we have been asked to present it again for those of you who may have missed it or who want to hear it again. Joining me today in the presentation are Erin Burris from Benchmark Planning in Charlotte, North Carolina, and Deb Myhoff from Communitas in Portland, Oregon. Brianne Rothstein, who was supposed to be with us today, had an exciting evening last night when she helped deliver her sister's baby in an emergency situation, and so she is not with us today, but we send our congratulations to her. This presentation, as Christine has said, is sponsored by APA's Private Practice Division. Our division is dedicated to meeting the needs of private practice planning consultants through networking, through provision of information, and through technical support. And you'll see our link at the bottom of the screen. One of the products that we're very proud of is the APA Private Planning Practice Handbook. It's a new product that we've just come out with. It's a wonderful guidebook for private planning practice, and we offer it to all of the members of the Private Planning Practice Division as a complimentary benefit. So why should we talk about ethics today? Well, as planners, we're all from time to time faced with both minor and major ethical issues, and these are often very nuanced and very tricky to deal with. And so we've structured this session to reflect what we hope are some of the typical or relatively common types of ethical situations that you might confront on a daily, or hopefully not daily, but not all that infrequent basis. AICP has a code of ethics and professional conduct, and in this session we'll focus on how that code is applied, particularly in private practice. As an overview, many of you are likely to be familiar with the Code of Ethics, but the code, for those of you who are not, describes the full range of a planner's ethical responsibilities, and it sets the behavioral expectations and standards to be followed in professional practice. The code is divided into 4 sections. Section A speaks about the principles that we aspire to. Our aspiration defines the aspirational values and ideas that have come from the membership. Section B talks about our rules of conduct, and then Section C talks about code procedures, particularly in light of handling infractions to the codes. And then Section D talks about the procedures involved for planners who have been convicted of serious crimes. With that as a background, we would love to hear a little bit about you. So we wanted to find out a little through 3 different polls about yourselves. And Christine, I'd like to hand this over to you for poll 1, please.
Okay, I am launching poll 1. We'll give it a few more seconds. Don't worry, your responses will remain anonymous. Okay, I think that's good. I'm going to close the poll and then I can show the results. All right, Dina, are you able to see those results?
I am not.
Okay. We have 36% are eating lunch, 17 checking email, 1 talking on the phone, all the above 3%, and nope, just listening, a resounding 44%. So in the middle. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and close that and then launch poll number 2 for you.
Thank you.
And this one is just simply asking how long you've worked as a planner. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and close that up and then I can show the results. So 3%, more than 40 years. 46% is 20 to 40 years. The majority, 49%, 5 to 19 years. 2% is less than 5 years, and we don't have any students on the line. So I'm going to hide that, and then we'll launch our final poll for the time being. And it's, what kind of planning do you do? Okay. I'm going to close that up and then share the results. So local government, 30%, state regional government, 8%. The majority, 51%, is private consulting. We have 6% in nonprofit and 5% in other. So with that, I'm going to move forward and turn it over to Aaron Burris to get us started on our first example. Aaron.
Yes. Can everyone see the screen that says scenarios and situations?
I don't see it yet. Let me try sending it to you one more time.
Okay.
Did you click to show your screen?
There was no pop-up.
Oh dear. Okay. Let me try one more time.
Okay.
Okay. How about now?
There it is.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. So what we're going to do now, we're going to go through a few ethical scenarios. The first thing we're going to do after we read the scenario is get everyone's initial response, sort of their gut reaction to what they would do in that scenario. Then what we're going to do is go through and review parts, the relevant parts of the Code of Ethics with the principles and the code. And then after we have gone through that review, we're going to get your response after taking those things into consideration to see if there's a difference between your initial responses and your response after review. And then after all of these scenarios, we will have a chance where folks can ask questions and present your own scenarios that we can discuss. So I'm going to go ahead and move into the first scenario that I'm going to read. Scenario number 1 is called Be My Guest. The scenario is, you are working on a week-long planning charrette in a popular resort community, and one of the major local hotel owners arranges with the town to provide lodging and meals to your consulting team during the duration of the charrette. The charrette was focused on an area that includes the hotel, but wasn't the main focus of the project. Near the end of the charrette, the owner offers you a certificate for an all-expense-paid weekend of your choice. So now I'm going to read through the options here. What would you do? A, accept the certificate and enjoy some well-deserved vacation time. B, accept the certificate if there were no recommendations regarding the hotel property. C, politely decline the certificate. Or D, decline the certificate and discuss free lodging issue with your boss. So I'm going to turn it over to Christine to get the poll started. Christine?
I'm sorry, I was talking to myself. Okay,
Oh, okay.
so our results are shown here. So 2% accept the certificate and enjoy some well-deserved vacation. 3% accept the certificate if no hotel property recommendations. The majority, 54%, politely decline the certificate, and closely, 42%, decline the certificate and discuss with your boss.
Okay.
So I'm going to close that down, and we're back to your screen.
All right, great. So now we're going to go ahead and discuss the relevant ethical principles in dealing with the scenario. We look at principle number 1, subsections B and C. Subsection B says, we shall have special concern for the long-range consequences of present action. C, we shall pay special attention to the interrelatedness of decisions. And then under principle 2, subsection C, we shall avoid a conflict of interest or even the appearance of a conflict of interest in accepting assignments from clients or employers. And then from the rules of conduct, number 5, we shall not as public officials or employees accept from anyone other than our public employer any compensation, commission, rebate, or other advantage that may be perceived as related to our public office or employment. And on this one, I just want to point out that even though we are private practice planners, we are employed by the public sector using public funds in the public interest in most cases, and by extension that makes us public employees, and therefore we fall under number 5. Then under number 6, we shall not perform work on a project for a client or employer if in addition to the agreed upon compensation from our client or employer, there is a possibility for direct personal or financial gain to us, our family members, or persons living in our household, unless our client or employer, after full written disclosure from us, consents in writing to the arrangement. So, given the review of those relevant principles and rules, again, we're going to open the poll for what you would do. I'm going to read them one more time. Accept the certificate and enjoy some well-deserved vacation time is A. B, accept the certificate if no hotel property recommendations are included from the charrette. C, politely decline the certificate. Or D, decline the certificate, discuss free lodging issues with your boss. So I'm going to turn it to Christine to open the poll. And
all right, I'm going to close it up now, and I'm going to share those results. So 1% accept the certificate, enjoy some well-deserved vacay. 1% accept certificate, no hotel property recommendations. And again, 54% politely decline the certificate, and 44% decline the certificate and discuss the issues. So that's very interesting. 54% for politely decline the certificate is still the same as it was the first round.
Okay, so no change there after reviewing the principles. So either everybody is very familiar with the principles and rules and they would make the same decision even after that review, or it's just cut and dry. When we did this presentation at the North Carolina conference, we were able to hear from people the reasons why they chose the option they did, whether they would just politely decline or the reasons they felt it necessary to discuss with their boss. I'd say probably a higher percentage at the North Carolina conference just said politely decline because it was just a lot, there wasn't as much involved with doing that as it is discussing with their boss, but those are interesting results. So I'm going to now turn it over to Deb to go over scenario number 2.
Great. Christine, does that look good?
It looks great.
Excellent. Thank you. So scenario number 2, a little more involved. This will take me a little bit to wind up for you. So a client hires your consulting firm to develop a master plan for redevelopment, revitalization of a modest-sized area. Residents in the area are typically low and moderate income, and there's also quite a bit of ethnic and racial diversity. A little more than half are African American, a third are Latino households. So the tasks in your master plan contract include creating a public involvement plan and conducting community outreach with meaningful public involvement, especially meaningful public involvement to include this diverse population that's currently living in the area. So the consultant creates the plan, the public involvement plan, to get feedback from community members on the project, goals, potential programming, general feedback on concepts that are designed throughout the process. So the master planning gets underway. My municipal client, in this case, implements the tasks in the public involvement plan with the least potential for controversy. So picks off some of the easy things that are in the involvement plan. Posts some information on the web, takes some information to the library, collaborates with some other professionals, folks they generally talk to on a daily basis, and then also engages a few prominent business owners in the redevelopment area for their opinions. However, the client as yet has never created an opportunity for other community members to actively participate in decisions and changes in their neighborhood, despite having a public involvement plan. The client, somewhere down the line, master planning's been underway for a while, lots of other tasks are underway, and the client directs the consultant to complete the other tasks in the master plan, but not necessarily the public involvement portion. So the consultant tries to express the presumed public interests in the master plan, despite not really being able to engage them, and continues to mention the need for community engagement and involvement. The client maintains they've done all the engagement the city has the capacity to undertake. So somewhere in the midst of the master plan, the client says, we've done all we can, we have to move on, we're at capacity. So the community will be notified from here on out of public hearings as part of the eventual review of the master plan by the Planning Commission. However, the residents in the area and nearby businesses aren't particularly tuned in to city proceedings. The client explicitly tells the consultant that the rest of the scope and budget for the public involvement plan will not be used. So, what do you do in this case? Do you complete the contracted scope of work as directed by the client, even if doing the work in this manner may make it challenging to comply with all the ethical principles and rules? It might be possible, but a little challenging. Do you scope of work as directed by the client, but document the client's new direction, especially that of which compromises the consultant's ability to adhere to the contracted scope of work? Or do you give the client a 30-day notice of intent to terminate the contract unless the client meaningfully involves the public and engages the public interest? Christine, ready for the poll?
Okay, it is launched. Give it a few more seconds. Okay, I'm going to close it up and show the results. So interesting. All right, 4% complete the contracted work as directed. The majority, 75%, complete the scope as directed, but document the client's directives. And then 21% give 30-day termination unless changes are made. So
Great.
it is back to you now.
Is it showing up as presentation mode?
It is not.
I didn't think so. Here we go. Thank you.
Thanks.
So this presents some challenges when reviewing the Code of Ethics, and really relies, I think, really relies pretty heavily on the aspirational principles side of thing rather than the Code of Conduct. But I'll give you a few examples. So under Principle 1 of the aspirational principles, which, by the way, is, in case you don't have it in front of you, Principle 1 addresses our overall responsibility to the public. So 1D, we shall provide timely, adequate, clear, and accurate information on planning issues to all affected persons and to governmental decision makers. 1E, we shall give people the opportunity to have a meaningful impact on development of plans and programs that may affect them. Participation should be broad enough to include those who lack formal organization or influence. And Principle 1F, one we don't always seek to get guidance from. We would if we had the scenario. We just don't always have scenarios where we have to. 1F, we shall seek social justice by working to expand choice and opportunity for all persons, recognizing a special responsibility to plan for the needs of the disadvantaged and to promote racial and economic integration. We shall urge the alteration of policies, institutions, and decisions that oppose such needs. Again, these are aspirational principles. So aspirational principle number 2 addresses our responsibility to our clients and employers. And in the body of 2, actually, it speaks to the service of our clients' interests shall always be consistent with our faithful service to the public interest as well. So sort of lays out how we, as private practice planners, have to address both our client and our public interest. And so 2B, we shall accept the decisions of our client or employer concerning the objectives and nature of the professional services we perform, unless the course of action is illegal or plainly inconsistent with our primary obligation to the public interest. What do we do with that? So a couple of rules of conduct that may apply to this scenario. Number 1, we shall not deliberately or with reckless indifference fail to provide adequate, timely, clear, and accurate information on planning issues. So as a contracted private planner, what is our responsibility to adhere to this rule of conduct? And rule of conduct number 2, we shall not accept an assignment from a client when the services to be performed involve conduct that we know to be illegal or in violation of these rules. Illegal or violation, that's a good question. Okay, let's try it again. Christine?
Okay, it is launched. We'll give it another second. Things are changing a little. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and close it, and I'll share those results now. So we went from 4% to 3% for complete the contract as directed. From 75%, we went to 62%, complete the scope as directed, but document client's directives. And then from 21% to 36%, give 30-day termination notice. So it looks like there was a little bit of a flip-flop between our last two.
Yeah, it's interesting. So we did a similar presentation at the National APA conference in Seattle this last spring, and these latter results are, if I recall correctly, are pretty similar to how they came out after folks at that session were able to talk to one another and talk about the ethical principles here. It's difficult as a private practice planner to think about that last one. It sounds simple to give your termination notice, but remember that this is a full master plan, not just the public involvement section of the scope that you're responsible to carry out. And so a lot of thought would have to be given to that, though really maybe it might be the only best choice. So I would love, when we get to the question and answer period, it would be great to hear if anyone else has other ideas about how to resolve that particular scenario. And just so you know, all of these scenarios are real-life scenarios that private practice planners have developed, so these have happened. Okay, so I am also in charge of scenario 3, standing in for Brianne, and here we go. This one's a lot simpler to describe. So scenario 3, your firm is working as a contracted planner for a township, a municipal township, and your firm is also now working for a private developer who is about to propose development in that same township that you're also the municipal planner. So 2 different staff members are working on each project. One's working for the private developer, the other one's working as the contract planner, but both within the same firm. What should guide the professional relationship of the 2 staff members working on either side of the table? So, should you trust that the consultant municipal planning staff can effectively review plans for the private development project, even if both employees are from the same firm? B, should you sub out, should the municipal planner sub out to another consultant to perform the reviews of the private development project? Or C, maybe more information is needed. It depends on the size of the municipality or the size of the firm. You might be able to keep a better firewall between the staff in different size situations. So Christine, let's test those.
Okay. Okay, it is now live. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and close it up and share the results. So 5% trust the municipal consultant to effectively review the plan. 74% the municipality should hire out an outside consultant to review the project plans, and 21% it really depends.
Okay, so a few of the ethical principles to consider before we think about the response again. Principle 1, again, addresses our responsibility to the public, and 1C, we shall pay special attention to the interrelatedness of decisions. So that might help give us a little guidance. And do I have control here? Yes. Principle number 2, our responsibility to our clients and employers. So 2A, we shall exercise independent professional judgment on behalf of our clients and employers. So independent professional judgment. I'm sorry I don't have this up on the slide, but I think there's another one under Principle 2C. We shall avoid a conflict of interest or even appearance of conflict of interest in accepting assignments from clients or employers. So that may come into play. That would be interesting to explore. And then rule of conduct. Number 19 probably most applies to this scenario. We shall not fail to disclose the interests of our client or employer when participating in the planning process, nor shall we participate in an effort to conceal the true interests of our client or employer. So we would need to notify both the private developer and our municipal clients of the action that may take place here. And there's one other rule of conduct that may or may not apply. Number 9, we shall not engage in private discussions with decision makers in the planning process in any manner prohibited by law or agency rules, procedures, or custom. That one may give us some guidance about checking in with our municipal client to see if there's any sort of local rules that would prevent us from having this sort of relationship. So let's do another round of polling.
All right, it is launched. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and close it now and share those results. Okay, great. So 5% stayed the same. Trust municipal consultants to effectively review the plan. From 74% to now 85%, the municipality should hire out. And from 21% down to now 10%, it depends.
Yeah, it's interesting. So another 10% moved into B, the sub out, the municipal municipality should sub out to another consultant to perform the reviews. That might be the simplest scenario. You know, as private planners, we could also think about how to preempt this, of course. You know, should your company have a policy that you won't represent developers in places where you're the contract planning staff? What does that do? I mean, we would have to sort of weigh that. Is that in global in the public interest? What would that do if you work for a small or rural community, can't find another contract planner to serve the area? So just need to be sort of thoughtful and cautious about those things. So we are moving along rather quickly. That's the conclusion of the first three scenarios. We're hoping we can have a dialogue and discussion with you all, get your questions and comments or any scenarios you'd like us to try to tackle on the fly. And we do have a fourth scenario if we're running even more quickly after the end of question and answer. We can go through one more scenario as well, but we'd really like to hear from you. And here's our contact information for anyone interested. And Christine, I believe, is going to moderate.
Okay, great. So folks, go ahead and put your questions in, and be sure to include which scenario you're talking about, if you wouldn't mind, please. Okay, so first, sort of overall, are there correct answers to any of these scenarios?
I don't think so. I think all of these, as Dina mentioned at the beginning, it's never black and white. It's always a nuance situation, and these are, you know, big scenarios that have been distilled down into simple problem sets. But there's always more information out there that makes them even more complicated. And I think we just have to find the best balance in some cases. Some may be more cut and dry than others. Erin, do you have any thoughts on that?
No, I know with the first scenario that, you know, I didn't really focus on, it was pretty split between the politely decline and decline but talk to your boss. And I think that the principle that was relevant as far as not performing any work for compensation without first talking to your employer. Basically, if you're declining it, you know, it's not, you don't necessarily need to talk to your employer because there's no scenario under which you're going to accept that additional compensation. So, you know, reading rule of conduct number 6, you know, basically, since you're not even thinking about taking it, you don't really necessarily need to talk to your employer, but it's always a good idea to disclose as much information as possible when you're speaking with your employer. So that one, it really, either one of those answers I think is ethically sound, but it just depends on the situation.
Okay. I don't remember who, but one of you had mentioned that these were actually real-world examples. Do either of you happen to have the results of those actual real-world examples? What path was actually chosen?
This is Erin. I can speak to scenario number 3. We Benchmark actually has a very interesting business model. I am the municipal planner for 5 different communities in North Carolina. I do the zoning administration, the day-to-day planning, I review site plans all the time. We also have, an arm of our company, and this is a more recent addition to the way we've done business, and that we work for private entities as well. We have made it a policy that we will not accept work for private entities within communities that we do the planning for. So we haven't ever actually run into a situation where we have one of our contract planners who's a municipal planner for that community that ends up having to review a plan or do something like that for a private developer. So we just avoid that situation altogether. We decline the work. But if we didn't have that model, if we didn't have that policy, we could run into that situation more often. So that's sort of how we handle it.
This is Deb. I've had scenarios similar to scenario 2. It's of course always different in real life, so these are based on real life scenarios, but again distilled down for simpler description in the seminar here. So, but scenario 2 was even more complicated for me, or the scenario that's similar to scenario 2, in that I was the sub-consultant. So I didn't have control over the prime contract with the municipality, which makes it a little different. So can I really give 30 days notice? I'm giving 30 days notice to the prime contractor, and maybe it makes it easier for me in that case, but on the other hand, the master plan will carry on, and so is it better, more ethical for me to stay on the team and try to represent the public interest under that social justice principle 1F, represent the interests of those who aren't there to represent themselves? Would that be the more ethical thing to do rather than resign from the contract and the project? And cross my fingers that the rest of the folks there have the same ethical code of conduct. So it's never that straightforward. And in that case, especially, I think it's really looking at the balance of the whole and determining what your role is and how you can best sort of chart a course forward. Dina, did you have some other thoughts?
Yeah, we are, in addition to being planners, we also have designers, urban designers and landscape architects in our firm, and we tend to have a similar policy to the one that Erin described for benchmark, and that is that we will, if we're doing master planning, for example, for a municipality, we will not accept a private development contract as well for the same, just to avoid any potential of conflict or to even give the impression that there might be that kind of conflict.
Okay, thank you. Let's move forward. We have a question from scenario 1. Well, it's more of a statement, but to get some comments on it. In the first scenario, related to the whole team having free lodging provided by the hotel, seems to be more of an issue for me, not the vacation certificate.
Yeah, that came up in our discussion in North Carolina. I also have some issues with that as well. What had happened in that situation was the town had basically arranged for that lodging. So basically what it's saying is the town at that hotel provided the lodging. So it was paid for by the municipality. It wasn't provided by the resort community. So it wasn't a free thing, but it may have been more prudent to find lodging maybe outside of the planning area and then come in, to avoid any sort of appearance of conflict of interest. But it was paid for by the town as part of the charrette process.
Okay, thank you. A question for scenario 2. Why does resigning have to be an option? If you're a small consulting firm and you really have to rely on something like this, it sort of makes it difficult if one of the scenario outcomes is to completely remove yourself from it. So I guess the question is more, should you really even have that on the table on some level, actually removing yourself and, putting in a 30-day termination, if, this might be one of your main routes for income for the year?
Sure. Yeah, it's probably not the first option I would choose, but I mean, I suspect in certain circumstances it is a viable option. I mean, if you really feel like you cannot uphold your ethics and principles as a planner, it just doesn't feel right. We've all been near those projects, and often we can find our way through them and find some better solutions. But if you can't find a better solution and your client really is obstinate, you have to think through what's the best option here. How do I maintain my personal ethics? And I recognize that, yeah, there's a in this scenario especially, I think there would be a major financial hit for walking away. And as a planner, we're also thinking, private planners, we're also thinking about our reputation and the sort of principles of keeping our business intact. And so it's a challenging one, but I think that termination is still on the table. I'm not saying it's the greatest option. I don't know, Erin or Dina, if you have anything more to add to that.
Well, I think you hit on it earlier. If you're part of that process, at least you are still doing your best to ensure that social justice is being attempted. You're there as sort of the conscience of the process, whether or not they do exactly what you think they should do. I don't know. What do you think, Dina?
Well, I think it's not always a matter of money with some of the communities. It's a matter of worry or fear that if the project is opened up, that it will never end, that it'll get very complicated, et cetera, et cetera. I think that as a consultant, it's also our responsibility to work with the client to allay those fears and to develop a strategy that might help satisfy our obligations to reach out to people and to communities, as well as satisfy or allay the client's concern about, does this open up a can of worms that I'm not going to be able to handle? And so before walking away from a project, I think I would try really hard to figure out a compromise solution if possible, so that walking away would definitely be a last resort.
Yeah, and actually now that that's great, Dina, and the more you mention that too, I mean, there's probably another option here that's something like you talk to the project manager's superior's boss, city manager, council. I mean, you kind of chart a way to get through this and make sure everyone's aware. Before you would cancel any contract, you'd make sure everyone's aware of the situation and try to work through that problem and find some better outcomes. So the person who asked the question, is this a real viable option? Maybe not, but it makes for an interesting conversation.
Let's stick with this scenario for just another minute or two. I'm curious if there's a way to eliminate this as even a potential problem by incorporating public participation, thresholds in the contract that you have with the municipality. Someone typed in a well-written contract should eliminate the public participation issue. is that an option? Just thinking ahead of time so that something like this wouldn't rear up in the end.
That's actually a really good point.
You know, the approach, all of our contracts have an approach attached to it, a scope of work attached to it, and it sounds like in the initial scope of work for this project in this scenario, outreach to these communities was included in the scope. It was later eliminated. And so I think that presents a difficult situation about, you know, contractually we are obligated to do the scope of work, but we've been asked not to do this component of the scope of work. So in many cases it is already in the contract, and so how do you satisfy it while still rather than just give the money back for that part of it or whatever. I'd be interested to hear what Erin and Deb have to say.
That's right, Dina. I mean, it's not unusual for scopes to change, and especially a larger master plan scenario here, I'm guessing would take quite a bit of time, and conditions always change as you get into a project. So, right, even if the scope of work is ironclad, that doesn't mean your client can't change that scope of work.
Right. But I think as we were saying earlier, it's probably wise to try to figure out a way to, even if it changes, to still be able to satisfy the core principles that were the basis for the original tasks.
Right.
Okay, I'm going to take one more question here for scenario 2, and then we'll move on. Would it be ethical to go to the press, either openly or secretly, or just mention the ongoing effort to local leadership, hoping that they will contact the client and, you know, tell them that the importance of the public participation and to put it back into the plan?
I mean, I'm sure we all have a pit in our stomach just thinking about that right now, but yeah, it's interesting, you know, is that the pathway that allows you to meet your responsibility to the public? And is that your only option? I mean, back to what Dina has been saying is absolutely true. I mean, I think you need to see if you can find a better strategy or adjust your strategy, but stay in the project and find a way with your client to reach this principle and these goals. But whew, yeah, can you ethically go to the press? I mean, it's sort of you're as a private practice planner, this happens sometimes where you get in the pinch between what's the better public interest and what's our obligation to our client and their direction. I know, Erin.
Okay.
Okay.
I feel like.
Oh, go ahead.
I feel like we have a. Sorry. Sorry. Go ahead, Deb.
No, I'm done.
I feel like we have an obligation to our client to not go behind their backs, but to work things out with our client and not go out to the press about something. I think going to the press behind your client's back indicates a real problem of communication between yourself and your client, and probably if you get to that situation, it may be worth stepping back and resigning the commission rather than going to the public with it, which would probably result in your being fired anyway.
Okay, thank you. Let's move into just some scenario questions that some of our listeners have. The first one, a A common scenario that I have faced previously as a private consultant representing a client is it okay to take a friend or a public planner out to lunch or buy drinks after work if you have current projects submitted and being reviewed by that public agency?
I'll attempt to take a first stab, but hoping Dina and Aaron can help out as well. This is an area where I personally exercise a lot of caution, and I'm quite conservative about. Our state ethics laws also provide additional guidance, and I'm guessing every state has some additional guidance to this as well that we should all be aware of, because we are public employees, as Aaron mentioned earlier, in many cases. So, but it's difficult because I'm friends with a lot of planners who are public sector planners, and I tend, for this scenario that you've outlined here about taking someone out to lunch or to drinks, I happily meet with someone for lunch or drinks, but I tend to avoid putting them in the awkward position of offering to pay. So I will just go Dutch and split it, and they're also adhering to the ethical principles of our state, and so they know, and most of the public sector planners that I work with are well versed in sort of what the ethics are about receiving gifts in that way. I think where it becomes more challenging is when you're having a dinner party or something like that. I mean, does that count as your contribution to someone's dinner? I don't know.
Anyone else have comments on that one?
We're finding that most of our clients actually adhere to the policies of their jurisdictions, our public sector clients, and are very careful to say that they are paying their way. But I agree that where it is trickier is where it's a personal situation, and private parties or things like that are very difficult to deal with.
Just anecdotally, I mean, in North Carolina, it's very common all the time from a networking perspective that, you'll go out to lunch with someone one time and you pay, and then the next time you go out to lunch and they pay. It's just a matter of etiquette back and forth, so it's sort of a break-even sort of thing, but it's probably best to avoid that situation as far as paying for a public official's lunch if they are reviewing something that you're doing.
Okay, thanks. Next question. So the holidays are upon us. You're a private consultant and you want to send a small gift to one of your clients who's a municipality just for saying, hey, thanks for the business and happy holidays, happy new year. Is that ethical?
We send cards. When we send anything, it's a card. We don't send gifts because we do think it is a sticky situation.
Anyone else?
We do the same thing.
Yeah, we just send cards. I will say that again, I've worked as a planner in municipalities, and being in the municipality's office frequently, we have had folks who will send chocolate or baklava just to the planning office in general, and they have put it on the table there before for folks to have. That was not an uncommon thing. But as a private practice firm, we have sent out cards, but we have never sent out gifts or any sort of food or anything like that.
Okay, thank you. Next mini scenario. Is it ethical when trying to get new business to meet over lunch and pick up the tab as a means of marketing?
I guess we
I don't
kind
know.
of.
What do the participants have to say?
Yeah, I'd be curious to know what everybody else out there has to say. But we kind of touched on it before, with as far as picking up the tab, and it just depends on the laws of the state or the community. But also as far as I don't know, help me out here.
Well, I mean,
And if I could interject for just a moment,
Yeah.
people are asking me to repeat the question.
Great.
So a public or a private consultant is trying to get some new business, takes someone out to lunch, wants to know if it's ethical to pick up the tab as a means of marketing. And I guess the follow-up question to this would be, does it make a difference if they happen to be from the public sector or the private sector, consultants with a developer and wants to take the developer out to lunch versus the public sector potentially getting work from a municipality? Does it matter even at that point?
I think it matters. Just because we do treat our public officials differently than other, I mean, even taking another consultant who you might team up with out to lunch is a different scenario than taking someone out to lunch who is also a public official. And I'd have to read through my code of ethics here to find where it says that, but it seems different. It seems very different. And the scenario where you're using it for marketing, you don't have work with them now. I mean, there's a real perception issue there with a potential conflict of interest with public contract coming out later that I would advise a consultant against. But
we typically, when we want to market to a public sector, we typically don't do a lunch or meal kind of thing to do that, I would think. But I do feel there is a difference between public and private sector. I think I agree with, was it Erin or Deb who spoke prior?
Okay, this is interesting. Someone typed in, it is ethical for a consultant to offer, but unethical for the public sector client to accept. So that's kind of interesting. I don't know how I feel about that. Just, kind of putting all of the weight on the public side. What are your thoughts?
Well, I mean, the question is it ethical for you to put that public official in that position?
Mm-hmm.
Or that, yeah.
it might not be good business either, right?
Or for the public official to put you in that position as well is the other side of it.
That's true.
Okay.
I wish, it's frustrating that we don't have a way to do an open conversation on this, because it would be lovely to be able to hear everybody.
We are getting, there's a lot of repeat comments that are kind of flying in, so I'm just sort of grouping them together. And there are some folks saying, it's fine as long as, in terms of paying for a public sector person, as long as that particular person wouldn't be involved either in determining whether you receive a contract or monitoring that contract. I don't know, that might get a little gray as well. But there's definitely I've got to say, there's a split. Some say it's okay, it's fine, you don't even have a contract. Others say, in terms of the public, it's just a hot button and don't go there.
Yeah.
I'm looking at just really quickly, the rules of conduct number 5. We shall not, as public officials or employees, accept from anyone other than our employer any compensation, commission, rebate, or other advantage that may be perceived as related to our public office or employment. So that one would need to be studied a bit.
but that says public officials. It's interesting.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I mean, I can see how this gets hard. You know, as planners, we're a smaller circle. We know each other. You know, we attend a lot of the
Yeah.
same events, and we, you know, on some level, a lot of us become good friends with each other. And I've, on the private side, have worked with people, you know, they might be friends with someone in the public sector for 20, 30 years, but
That's right.
still feel kind of odd, you know, trying to figure out where that boundary is. You know, their kids play together, but they can't take someone out for a beer. Um,
Yeah.
so it can get, you know, really fishy and hard to
Oh,
deal
the
with.
burdens of the private practice planner.
I guess what a good problem to have, right? So let's go on to this is interesting. So let's take the reverse side. Let's say, and I think this is great that we're having this kind of at the beginning of December, as a lot of these, especially in terms of gift giving and lunch, you know, celebrations, things like that, are starting to happen now. So let's turn the table and say you're on the public side, and baskets of fruits and cheeses and chocolates and candies are just pouring in. From the public side, if you see them there on the counter, what do you do? Do you eat them, take them home? Do you just leave it and pretend it's not there? You know, what do you do?
Well, I mentioned before that just, you know, being a contract planner that serves in municipal offices sometimes, and those things come in, oftentimes some of the communities that I work in, they'll lay the stuff out for, you know, even the general public to grab one, you know, so it doesn't look like they're just hoarding it for themselves or getting some sort of advantage. They accept that it's come and they sort of share it with whoever comes in. So I don't know if that's an acceptable way to handle it, but that's how I've seen it handled in some of the municipal offices I've been in.
That's my experience as well, Erin. I, in a previous life, was a public sector planner, and that's exactly what we would do. Any gifts that came, you know, fruit baskets and such that came in, they were always put in the lunchroom or some sort of public area and shared among whoever happens to come by.
Mm-hmm.
Seems like a good response, actually.
I don't really see that sending it back is a proper response. We don't want your chocolate.
Be a little odd.
I mean, after all, yes, we're planners, but we're also human beings, and we have to, you know, have some level of etiquette and decorum. We can't just be cold robots.
That's right.
Okay, I can't not ask this question.
Uh-oh.
That was your preface here. So here's the scenario. I work for a public sector agency that my supervisor, who happens to be the planning director, discourages being AICP certified because then, well, we're held to a code of ethics. So what, and I mean, honestly, I don't know, there's some merit, I guess, to this. I understand the question. What would be the best approach to deal with the situation short of gaining new employment somewhere else?
So that implies that other planners that who are not AICP certified don't have to adhere to a code of ethics, which I have a problem with.
Yeah.
You know, I think there's a general professional code of ethics that should be adhered to whether you're AICP certified or not. So, you know, I don't think it's a mantle that you put on that it's a discouraging question, I think, because of that.
I attended an ethics session a few years ago, and I recall, I won't get this totally right, but I recall someone making the distinction between sort of personal morals and professional ethics, and a lot of times those things are the same, and sometimes they they veer off in different directions. But yeah, I mean, you have your own sort of personal and professional principles to abide by as well. And you know, that's a career coach kind of question, I think, in some ways. I mean, you really have to think about, can you meet the mission of your organization under those circumstances, and is that the place for you to work?
Any other comments on that one?
Mm-mm.
Okay. If you don't apply ethics now, you'll have the law applied to you later. I mean,
true.
I get it. I don't know if perhaps the question was more, not to be a bully about the question, but I'm curious if it was more about, is it just more hassle? You know, is it just one more thing that you have to think about and, you know, turn around over your shoulder and think about? Maybe that's more where that was going. I'm not sure, but okay, let's move on. Let's see. Okay. Here we go. I'm taking this webinar as prep for the AICP exam in May. Regarding scenario 2, there was the case where one answer was right and one answer was more right. And I have to tell you, as I took the exam this past May, and that's all that it's about, is which question is more right, because they're both right. I'm unclear which choice was the more right answer. 3-day notice or work with the client as directed. Any comments on that? Or just any thoughts about preparing, for those that might be on the line, preparing for the exam in terms of the ethics portion? Just any comments about that in general?
I have always told anyone that I have helped study for the exam on the ethics questions, it's not always the one that you would do, it's the one that Superman would do. It is the Superman answer. So probably in the case of that one, even though it doesn't necessarily seem like the thing that would be most, what's the word I'm looking for? It wouldn't be the most practical. The 30-day notice would probably be the answer on the exam because that's the Superman one. I don't know. What do y'all think?
Yeah, I mean, I mean, in that case, all the options given have some degree of correct pathways to them, and then there's the ones that aren't given here, as Dina mentioned. I mean, there's some other pathways you should take before you even consider any of these, I think. But yeah, which one is more right? Shades of gray.
I think the Superman guidance is a good guidance.
It seems to have worked so far for the folks I've helped study, so I'm going to go with that. So.
Okay.
I mean, well, maybe the other advice, you know, I haven't taken the AICP exam in a long time, so I can't recall specifics, but maybe Christine, you might be able to. My recollection is that the rules of conduct, because they are so clearly written and there are rules of conduct, that those directions given in the rules would probably take precedence if there was some struggle between the principles and the rules, which there shouldn't be. But the more clearly they're stated in the rules, I'm guessing that would lead you toward the correct answer.
Right.
Is that fair?
Yeah, absolutely. And, you know, I totally agree with the whole Superman comment, and I think that also goes for studying for any of the questions on the AICP exam. But for anyone who's listening out there who's in process of studying, email me. We'll talk. I have some resources. We did a webcast recently on it because it's still fresh in my mind. I urge you to pick my brain while it's still there. So just email info@ohioplanning.org, and we can talk more about that. Great, thank you. Let's go to another question here. Oh, this is interesting. As a planner, I've gotten the comment that being involved in CNU, the Congress for New Urbanism, is unethical. because you're essentially advocating for a particular strategy and are not completely open. The same could be said for some membership in green advocacy type situation. If you're LEED certified in some way that you might be kind of leaning towards that automatically. So what are your comments on being involved in other like organizations but that might advocate for a certain type of planning?
I belong to a number of organizations. I belong to APA, I belong to CNU, etc. And I belong to those organizations not because I necessarily advocate for any one position, but because I really want to keep up with and understand what's going on in the field from various perspectives. And so I don't think that it's I would come down on the side of saying it's not unethical to belong to related organizations in order to really understand the issues and approaches that various groups are taking to deal with similar kinds of problems.
I completely agree with that. I mean, just because you're involved in an organization doesn't necessarily mean you ascribe to all of their, theories about planning or the things that they like to focus on or advocate for. It means that you are trying to be a more well-rounded planner by being involved in those. And I've been to 2 workshops or conferences this week. The one I went to on Monday dealt with it was the Green Growth Toolbox that North Carolina Wildlife Resources puts on, and if I belonged to some sort of group associated with them, someone would say, well, I was a tree hugger that would just take the side of the environment over people every time. But I learned so much in that workshop. I learned about how to connect different green areas and how to involve the public in making sure that natural areas were taken care of for water quality and things like that. I also went to something yesterday, the Carolina Thread Trail Forum. We discussed the role of trails in North Carolina as far as economic development and tourism. Not only that, but recreation. So if you're, and I have been a member of the Thread Trail group before in the past, but that doesn't mean that I would look at trails as the most important thing in planning. I think it just makes you a more well-rounded person to be involved in those things because you can learn about so much, and I don't think it's unethical at all.
Okay. I guess going along with it, so it's okay to belong to such an organization as long as I don't actually advocate for it. So for example, I've written articles in favor of CNU principles. Is it enough just to disclose advocacy for it, or do I have to forego it altogether?
I don't think it seems like you have to forego it, and especially if you've been writing articles in the public sphere, that you have knowledge and thoughts about these things, and you're just bringing another element to the table. You do have an obligation to make sure that you're thinking of the interrelatedness of decisions, and you're thinking about the whole picture and the whole of the public interest, and the whole of your client or your employer. But I think just if you're trying to hide it or be subversive, that should make you question your role and why you're being subversive about an organization you belong to. But I don't see that as being a problem.
I agree.
And I don't see anything in the code of ethics or in the principles that would be contrary to that.
Okay, thank you. Next question. Do any of you know if AICP ever provides summaries of issues that have been put before the ethics committee? as far as a right answer from AICP that may be as close as we can get, and it would be good to know what their decisions are. Not asking for details and assuming they would certainly not release real names, locations, etc. I do believe that on APA's website, anything that comes through the ethics committee does get posted publicly. Is that correct?
For certain either.
I don't know the answer.
Well, if they don't, boy, that would be a great idea. We should probably work on that if they don't already. That would be actually brilliant if they don't already do that.
I'm ethically not multitasking while I'm on this call, so but one could probably look on the APA's website real quick.
Okay. Oh, it says I just got notice from someone. There is a posting of ethics decisions on the site. Phew, I thought so.
Yay.
Yeah.
Yay, star. Okay. Interesting. Okay. How should you respond? And hopefully, if anyone else has like a particular link that we can go to see the ethics cases that came before and were decided upon, if someone finds a link, let us know. Okay. How should you respond if you are a consultant and one of your public client project managers asks you to provide a professional reference for a new job they're seeking? Or I guess it could be opposite or from public to public. Thoughts on that?
I've had former clients ask for references. I don't find that to be a problem, but during an active contract, it seems like there's a conflict in there.
Yeah, I agree. If, in an active contract, I think that would definitely have the appearance of a conflict of interest. If for some reason they didn't get that job and stayed there, you would have done a favor for them, which I think does have an appearance of a conflict of interest.
Yep.
I agree, and I think it's important to make clear what your relationship was with the person, but I agree that I cannot recall when that I have given someone a reference in when we're working on an active project together.
I can't either, and I think it would be really simple in that scenario just to explain to the person asking why it's maybe not the right time
right.
for you to help in that manner.
Okay. I am going to take the screen because I just found, I think, what we're looking for. If I can show my screen, I don't know if I'm able to. Here we go. So if you go to planning.org/ethics, and you can scroll down and you'll find reports on cases, activity, and requests. So you just click on that, and then you can see a whole lot of case activity and requests. So 2014 is the latest, and you can see there were 13 total cases that came through. 9 cases were dismissed, 1 case was settled, and then there's 3 cases pending. However, it doesn't look like you can click on it.
See the cases?
Yeah, I swear, I thought you could. I don't know. So keep looking. I don't know. That's as far as I got for you all. Okay, so planning.org/ethics/report, at least you can see part of that. So I'm going to turn it, who had the screen up last? Was it Erin?
Deb.
Deb, thank you.
Deb.
I'm going to give it back to you just so we can keep your all the contact information up. Okay, let's see if we can get to just 1 or 2 more questions here. Thank you. Okay, let's see here. Another question. Is it ethical to contact a special interest group to attend a public meeting for a project without disclosing this information to the client?
Well, we always invite interest groups to meetings because we think it's important to engage them, but I've never come across a situation where I would not tell the client that I was doing that, and in fact inform the client ahead of time that we would be doing that and the reasons for why we would engage that group.
I agree. I mean, there shouldn't be any reason why you wouldn't disclose that to your client. I mean, a special interest group that is a stakeholder in the planning process, and it's important to include them, and it would just be important to inform the client why you think they should be involved in the process. And if they have some sort of, aversion to inviting that special interest group, they need to express that for whatever reason, and you can do your best to try to convince them otherwise. But I would never do that without first informing them, because you're working for them.
Right.
And I presume we're talking about a public sector client here.
Right.
But that's absolutely true. There's no reason.
Okay. One last question. Should planners submit recommendations with their staff reports, or is it okay to just be silent and let your elected officials do what they want to do?
I'll address this one because I run into this all the time. It is fine to give a recommendation when you have something to base that recommendation on, whether it be planning principles. In North Carolina, we do not have a law that says you have to have a comprehensive plan. South Carolina does, and I think it's a great legislation that they have. If they have zoning, they have to have a comprehensive plan. North Carolina does have on the books in their statutes that you do have to state whether or not a rezoning or text amendment to an ordinance is consistent with the adopted plan. So that is addressed, and typically recommendations for amendments to zoning maps or ordinances are given based on whether or not it is consistent with the plan, the surrounding uses, the infrastructure's ability to handle it. Where it gets a little sticky is when you're dealing with quasi-judicial situations, and I've seen it done both ways. So in a quasi-judicial situation, you typically have findings of fact. So if it's a variance or a conditional use permit, there's either findings of fact set forth in your state statutes or in your ordinances. But the question is that recommendation, is it biasing that quasi-judicial board? If you're basing that recommendation just on the information that you have prior to a public hearing, if some information were to come out during the public hearing that might change that quasi-judicial board's opinion or change how the findings of fact might be met. And certain states might have different rules on that. In North Carolina, it's been both ways. Some planners feel comfortable giving that recommendation based on the information given, and then having sort of a disclaimer that says, unless something comes out during the public hearing that would alter these findings of fact, then the findings of fact can be changed. So it's not unethical to give a recommendation, but there are nuances between state regulations that might affect that, and there might also be preferences in the community for the quasi-judicial boards, whether or not they want to see that recommendation or not.
I think it's a good answer. I really don't have anything to add to it.
The only thing I would add very quickly is just in cases, or in the type of planning that's a little fuzzier. So in Oregon, we have all those bases of comprehensive plans. But when doing sort of long-range planning or more detailed neighborhood planning, you have those findings of fact. You could make a recommendation. I have some clients that just by the course of what they do, their practice is not to make a recommendation, but to outline the many different options and the pros and cons for those options for the decision makers.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's a totally ethical and reasonable approach, as long as you really are being honest about the choices in front of them.
Yeah, that's good.
Yep.
Okay. Well, it's time to wrap up. So Dina Roadside and Aaron Burris and Deb Mehoff and poor Brianne Rothstein, who wasn't able to join us today. Thank you for spending some time with us, and thank you to the Private Practice Division for sponsoring this. Again, 1.5 ethics CM credits. Be sure to log those. And we have this recorded. It will go up on our YouTube channel, and a PDF will be available on our website. So again, thanks everyone, and have a great weekend.
Thanks.